Hello and bonjour and welcome to the south of France once again, where I am on a press trip organised by Le Boat to see what canal boating is like down here. I'm currently moored in a rather noisy Béziers, where there's been lots of traffic since early morning. There are also some people doing some work with lights or something they're putting up. Anyway, they started at the crack of dawn with all their power tools right outside the boat. And the weather, it has turned. The last couple of days have been glorious hot sunshine. Today it is very much overcast, still quite mild, and we've actually had rain. The decks are rather wet this morning, but nonetheless we shall press on. We're going to have to do quite a few miles, I think. I've been looking at the map, and in order to get to our end point by the end of Friday, we really do need to put the pedal to the metal and cover some ground. The alarming thing for today is that our first stop, I said it was noisy, the first stop is the very, very deep double lock, which I'm a little bit anxious about, and fairly soon after that we have a staircase flight of 7 locks, which should be interesting. It's one of the wonders of the canal round here. After that, many, many miles of open countryside. I'm boating once again, not with my canal wife. I know this is France, so I have my boating mistress Sally here with me. She's just downstairs doing her hair or something like that. Anyway, the locks open at 9. It's about 8:30, so just need to make everything shipshape and get ready for the off. We were keen to get going and through the lock at the end of the mooring basin as soon as it opened at 9 a.m, because the next lock flight after this only opens for a limited time each day. This first lock is quite the beast. It's deep, and you don't put a crew member off to handle the ropes as you normally would, but instead loop a single line through the vertical risers in the lock chamber. The lock keeper was careful though, and we rose without any turbulence. As soon as you exit the lock, there's a left turn, which puts you onto an aqueduct over the River Orbe. Having done that, we're now heading up for the 7-lock flight at Font-Serein, which doesn't open for about another 45 minutes. I can already see the end of the queue of boats waiting to go up, so it might take us quite a while, I think. We weren't quite sure if this really was the end of the queue, as they'd stopped so far back they might have just been having a coffee or whatever, but as we crept towards them, intending to check, they shouted angrily at us, so we pulled in behind. Suddenly, boats began emerging from the lock flight, which would be our cue to prepare to go in. That's the abandoned Font-Serein slope, which was beset with problems and abandoned. This way to the bottom of the locks. You start in the 7th chamber and go up 6, even though it's an 8-lock flight. It's all due to changes since it was built in 1680. With 3 boats squeezed into the bottom chamber, we expected the same routine we'd encountered in the locks up to this point, but they do things differently here, opening the gates ahead of you and letting the water rush into the next chamber, which cascades down to where the boats are. Not knowing this was going to happen, this was a tad disconcerting, but one presumes the lock keepers know what they're doing, so you just watch with mild tension. That's a lot of water coming in quite fast. Sally happily held the bow line to keep the boat taut against the lockside, while I had the rear one wrapped around a bollard. As the level rose, the keepers opened the sluices a little more, and the water gushed in even more enthusiastically. Just when you think it can't get any weirder, the lockies beckon you to move into the next chamber even while the water is still coming in. None of this feeble hanging around for the levels to equalise and be calm. You just keep shuffling forward until suddenly you're at the top lock. It's very efficient and good fun, and a good spectator sport, but not what I was prepared for. Oh look, there's Le Petit train we went on the day before. If you haven't seen the previous video, I've left a link to it in the description. Finally, we did have calm waters and the top gates were opened. There must have been some problem with the hydraulics on the left one, because halfway through opening, the Lockie started winding it manually. We came out second of the 3 boats, and knowing that we would be going slowly, I beckoned the boat behind to come past. He floored the throttle and overtook, only to be immediately shouted at for going too fast by liveaboards on these moorings. We crossed the aqueduct that we'd seen from the little tourist train. It goes over the River Orbe. And then we were back in the countryside, heading for Colombier. I suspect these large barges never move because they just wouldn't fit through some of the bridges. Oh look, it's a vineyard. We'd see a few of these on our journey. David, are the canals in France wider than in Britain? People have asked me. Not always, it turns out. There are some surprisingly narrow bits that might make you think you're on the North Oxford. Roused from her sunbed, Sally had a go at steering. But the lure of her book was too strong, and the wheel was handed back to me, which I didn't mind at all. As we go along, I'm keeping track of where we are, not only on the printed map, but also on my phone. And that has data roaming enabled, courtesy of Saily.com, who got in touch with me about a month before the trip, complete coincidence, and said, would you like to try one of our data roaming eSIMs? And I said, well, yes, I'm going to France, that would be very handy. And all you do is you download the Saily app from the Google Play Store or the App Store, install it obviously, and log into your account, and you tell it where you're going and for how long and how much data you need. And it installs this electronic SIM on your phone, so you don't have to muck about with the actual little tiny fiddly little card that's inside your phone. It just does it all electronically. And then when you get to your overseas destination, that SIM activates automatically and you have data then on your phone at very affordable rates, which are quite possibly better than you would be charged by your home provider doing roaming with them. Always worth checking for good rates, of course. And they support, it's something like 190 countries and 8 different regions, so they do regional variations as well. So whether you are going for business or pleasure, whatever the reason for travel, definitely worth downloading the Saily app, and when you get to checkout, do use the code CruisingTheCut for 15% off. That's certainly worth having as well. Of course, once you've got it, then anytime you travel, the app is already there and you can just say, well, now I'm going to this place and I'd like this much data for this long. And they've got all sorts of different plans, so just have a little browse, see what suits you, and don't forget to use code CruisingTheCut. Now, Saily is actually developed by the folks at NordVPN, very well-established company, so they've got good support. And they offer some security features on the SIM as well, like malware blocking and ad blocking, and it can also set up a virtual location, so your phone thinks it's somewhere else to where it actually is for the purposes of getting data. You know, that can be quite handy sometimes. Anyway, have a look at it. I found it very, very easy to use, and I've always said I'll only plug things that I actually like, and Saily certainly works very well indeed. So Saily.com, use code CruisingTheCut at checkout, don't forget. Some years ago, a fungal infection attacked the trees that provided a canopy of shade alongside the canal. A massive programme of felling was begun, with more than 3/4 of the plane trees removed. Now replanting is taking place with 7 different species of tree, which it's hoped will be more resistant to attack. The narrow section of canal continued. It would be just my luck on this quiet morning to encounter a boat coming the other way, wouldn't it? Well, guess what? Fortunately, they spotted us and pulled in on that slightly wider bit on the corner. The line of moored boats suggested we were reaching the town of Colombier, and the signs on the boats suggested they were used to hire boaters coming past. There's a marina here, though we didn't need to stop. It is tempting to stop at every waterside restaurant, though. And castle. Well, it looks like a castle to me. Another low bridge lay ahead, but that's not what was on my mind at this point. We are coming up towards the Malpass Tunnel, which is 160 metres long. One-way traffic only, so you have to check if anything's coming first. Put your navigation lights on. 3 kilometres an hour speed limit, and then go through gently. It's going to be coming up in the next couple of corners, I think. Very nearly there. It's not wide enough for boats to pass inside, but this other one was well clear by the time we got there. We gave a warning toot. Built in 1679, this is the oldest canal tunnel in Europe. Apparently the word tunnel derives from the French tonnelle, describing the curved shape of a barrel. The tunnel is 160 metres long. As we emerged, blinking into the daylight again, Sally resumed her sunbathing on the foredeck. I admired the wide-open countryside views from my elevated steering position. Note again the newly planted trees. Slowing for another set of moored craft, I could barely contain my excitement at spotting an actual narrowboat. Look, a real English narrowboat here in France. Zut alors! This one we had to duck for. Another toot was advisable. You can see why I startled everyone in Béziers with that horn. We entered the village of Poils, which is absolutely lovely and has some very interesting boats moored along its banks. There are 2 bridges which connect the 2 halves of the village, split by the canal. And another narrowboat. Suddenly we were awash with them. You could see for miles up here, and it really makes you appreciate how they built these canals 350 years ago. We saw lots of these signs denoting long-term moorings not available to passing boaters, and other signs offering us local produce like wine. This was the first bit of countryside canal bank where we could actually have got in close enough to moor if we wanted to, but we were heading for the town of Capestang, perhaps Capstang, where we were hoping to end the day. It's all just very tranquil and serene. Aha! That'll be Capestang. I never did find out how to pronounce it. What I can tell you is that that's the Collégiale Saint-Étienne, a late 13th century Gothic church. And that's a slightly rusty Dutch barge. Could do with a bit of fur tan on that. One thing I hadn't spotted until now was any winding holes. That's places to turn around if your boat is very long. But look, they do have them. Another narrowboat! It's an invasion of the British. At this point, Sally spotted a mooring, and I backed into it rather brilliantly given the wind, but I didn't film that as I was too busy steering. I wasn't sure we could moor here, but Sally read the sign and assured me it was okay. We just needed to pay a fee at the captainary office. There's one at every paid site. I'd wondered if the huge barges we'd seen ever moved. It turns out they do. Look at the size of that! You'll need a winding hole the size of Wales to turn that around. We went for a drink at the town square, which was rather charming, but upon our return I received alarming news. Well, this could be a bit awkward. I'm here with my boating mistress and I've heard the wife's turned up. Oh, Lorna! It's you! I wasn't expecting you.
David, it's you! And it's you!
Ah, this is France, of course. The mistress and the wife are the best of buddies.
My favourite mistress.
Entente cordiale indeed. And we went to a restaurant next to the canal for supper, while the weather turned thundery and very rainy. Time for bed. The next day dawned soggy. This is not what we expect from the south of France, and I shall be writing a stiff letter of complaint. It had rained so hard, some drips had even come through the window seals and onto the floor outside my cabin. The forecast was for thick cloud and gusty winds for the next couple of days, and it seemed the forecasters were right for once. Our fee for overnight mooring included 300 litres of fresh water, as well as 10 kilowatt hours of electricity. So while Sally and Lorna went shopping, I filled the water tank. This was as dismally slow as it is on the British canals. Can I just point out those clouds again? The bridge here is reputed to be the lowest on the canal, but apparently isn't. It's just the most awkwardly shaped and likely to cause damage if you don't go under dead straight. We made it, and guess what? Spotted another narrowboat.
Oh, look, they've got shutters on their boat. That's really nice. Yeah.
With Lorna now on board, we had more options for who steered and who made the tea. It didn't take her long to get to grips with the wheel once she learned to ignore my instructions. That's the church from earlier, which is the quietest building I've ever been in. It was quite eerie. And that must belong to the Beatles, I think. These sharp, blind bends must be tense if there's something coming the other way. What was I just saying about those blind bends? Lorna helmed us with no fear. We did a few toots on the horn, my skills having been honed back in Béziers. If you missed why, see the prior video. Is it heresy in France to say I'd had enough of seeing vineyards by now? As we were on a very straight bit, I put the hammer down. Oddly, given how rubbish the weather was, this was the busiest day for oncoming traffic. This is the Aqueduc et Épanchoir de Quarante, which means aqueduct and water trough of Quarante. Time for another tight bridge. Breathe in. Did I mention it was quite windy? They'll be pulling in the power here. That tiny bit of blue sky was just taunting us. Suddenly, in the middle of absolutely nowhere, was a creperie on the canal path. It gets great reviews on Google, but we didn't fancy trying to tie up there in this breeze. And then, again in the middle of absolutely nowhere, we spotted a cafe promising food and mini golf. Obviously, we had to stop and take a look, and they had mooring bollards for the purpose. Come on in to the oddest but most delightful place. No, the caravan isn't it. Look, mini golf. And the happiest dog, who was delighted to see some customers.
Hello, doggy. Hello, Shan. Oh, bon chien. Bon chien.
In fact, he was so pleased he fetched his ball for us. This is the cafe, a food truck in the middle of a field. We had a good lunch. Somewhat fuller, we got ready to set off again, wondering if we could take the dog with us. It really was starting to get very windy, and out of nowhere, a boat was suddenly just ahead of us. I still don't know how it appeared. This line of trees must be what the canal was like before the disease attacked them. Very cooling, if it was sunny. We approached the canal junction where an arm branches off to Narbonne. No time to go down that way on this trip, we continued west.
Oh, is it in your raincoat?
Then there's a short arm on the right that's used for mooring, so we veered left. This aqueduct goes over the River Cesse. Oh, look at the doggy having a snooze on the bridge. The village of Le Sommeil is next, and we'd heard there was a floating food barge here which we wanted to see. Like everywhere we'd passed so far, it's very picturesque. Another boat was just leaving, so we took their place on the bank and went to look around. I love a classic car, and you can't beat a De Cheveux. There's the barge with the food. We went aboard, but it was all a bit Epicurean, as the name had suggested, so we went for something simpler.
Keep the mistress happy.
And with the wind now practically at gale force, well, it seemed like it, we were off in search of our overnight mooring. The Bimini even tried to take off, the wind was so strong, and it whacked me in the face. We had to re-secure it. There is a golden rule that British canal boaters know well, which is that if you're going to meet another boat, it will be at a bridge hole. This holds true in France, it seems. They were closer, so we paused to let them through. I'd been making a case to Lorna and Sally that we should get as far as possible today because the forecast for later in the week was terrible. But I'd had enough of the wind by this point and thought these moorings looked nice. but I was overruled as it was only 3:30. So, clutching my hat to stop it disappearing, we chugged on. Over the Pont Canal de Repoudre, the oldest aqueduct in France apparently. And briefly the sun came out. I very much like the look of these potential moorings at Rubia too, but I was overruled again. The trouble with a wife and a mistress, it turns out, is that it's 2 against 1. 300 yards further down the canal was deemed excellent, so we stopped there. This was a nice spot, and we said hello to some friendly locals, including some lads going fishing and some people walking their dogs. Coming up in the final episode, my wife and mistress both nearly abandoned me for Stefan, the hot lock keeper. "Oh, he's so fit," they gushed, with no thought to my feelings. And we see some very peculiar sculptures by a lock. Thanks for watching. Cheerio.